Hello, I'm Nima Rajan, and welcome to Northwest Newsweek. A major development to report in the Greenstone area this week after the province gave its stamp of approval on the environmental assessment for Greenstone Gold's hard rock mine project. The proposed open-pit mine would be located 5 kilometers south of Geraldton and has been seen as an economic savior for that part of the region. Greenstone Mayor Ronald Beaulieu is ecstatic over the latest hurdle being crossed, and he says the new mine would bring hundreds of jobs to the area.
So exciting, so exciting. Great news. This is something I know that the company has been working for many years on. We had the federal EA approved back in December, and now the provincial EA has been approved, and today we can say that it is official.
But before the mine can go into full development, there is still much to do, including permitting, realigning of Highway 11, and the relocation of the MTO workyard, a Hydro One substation, and the OPP detachment. An arrest has been made in connection to the death of a 6-year-old Casa Bonita Lake First Nation girl. The OPP and the Anishinaabe-Aski Police Service arrested and charged 21-year-old Lanny Edward Mechanic with second-degree murder, and he is currently being held in custody. Sioux Lookout OPP were called to a residence last Wednesday to find the young victim seriously assaulted. The girl was taken to a local medical center by family for treatment, where she was pronounced dead. A post-mortem was scheduled to take place last week, and the investigation is ongoing. The OPP's Northwest Crime Unit has made an arrest in connection with a 2018 murder in Sioux Lookout. Back in September, a 40-year-old Sachigo Lake First Nation man was found injured in Sioux Lookout. George Tate later died as a result of those injuries. On Wednesday, investigators arrested a 32-year-old Alan Yerksa of Lac Seul. Yerksa has been charged with second-degree murder. After months of controversy surrounding the Fort Frances Mill and its wood rights, there's about to be some big changes to how that region's Crossroute and Sapawi forests are managed. A new partnership in the Rainy River District will see an amalgamation of the two forests. Corey Nordstrom has the details.
Information sessions were held at 3 locations in the Rainy River area, hosted by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Resolute Forest Products, and other community partners to highlight the next decade's worth of wood harvesting in the area. The partners gathered community feedback as they work on the later stages of the forest management plan that will run from 2020 to 2030.
Primarily, most of the people in the room right now are looking at where the blocks are, where the cutting blocks are, and where the roads would be constructed to get to them. There are some loggers in there, so they're interested in where they might be cutting.
The biggest change to the former plan is the combination of the two forests utilized in the area. The process started years ago, where Resolute, the managers of the Crossroute Forest, alongside Rainy Lake Tribal Resources, the managers of the Sapawi Forest, forged a deal to amalgamate the two to save costs and are now in the process of deciding who can use the land.
Resolute has entered into discussions with other parties to form what's called an ESFL, and in that case there is other parties from towns, municipalities, First Nations, the major logging companies that will be part of a new company that will manage the new forest come 2020.
Many in Fort Frances had hoped the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry could step in and use the wood rights in the Crossroute Forest to get Resolute to sell the closed paper mill to the sole buyer looking to restart it. A number of residents speculated that Resolute was in the wrong by using the wood from the Crossroute for its other mills to the east. MNRF officials say that was incorrect and that Resolute had been satisfying the terms and conditions of the Sustainable Forest License.
REPAP and Resolute were unable to come to an agreement regarding the sale of the Fort Frances pulp and paper mill. This was a business-to-business decision, which is confidential. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry isn't considering any action toward Resolute in cases like this.
Mayor June Call is pleased with what the new ESFL can bring to the region. She just wishes there was a way it could supply a restarted Fort Frances mill.
We're worried about what's going to happen in the meantime with the now SFL license to service our area. We want to make sure that it's still possible for wood to be designated and brought to Fort Frances, no matter what the business is.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Meanwhile, discussion revolving the future of the Fort Frances Mill continued this week. However, it was at Queen's Park. The NDP's Michael Mantha pressed the government on wood allocation and made specific mention to the situation involving the Resolute facility and the recent attempt by Rainy River Packaging to purchase the mill and make it operational again. However, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry John Yakabuski made a similar answer to the one he made to reporters last week in Thunder Bay.
The town contends the company is transferring Crown Fibre from the Crossroad Forest to its other operation in northwestern Ontario, contrary to the terms in a Sustainable Forest License Agreement. And the forest industry is in crisis again. Just last week, a couple of weeks ago in Thessalon, Midway Lumber has laid off 30% of their workforce as well. Will the minister tell the families in Fort Frances, Thessalon, and across the north that he will ensure that mills and forestry operations have the wood they need to operate and support the hundreds of direct and indirect jobs that depend on them?
The reality is that we must wait until such time as there is a purchase for the mill in Fort Frances before we can discuss the issue of wood supply for any mill. There are mills currently working in the north. The Crossroot Forest under the SFL has commitments. Should a sale be finalized, we will reopen those discussions.
It's been the talk of the town in Terrace Bay since it was quietly announced in November that the CIBC branch would be closing in that community. Since then, residents and officials have been fighting to keep it open or attract a new banking outlet. This week, residents finally met face-to-face with officials from CIBC to answer their questions and air out their concerns. Adam Riley reports.
It was a full house Thursday evening in Terrace Bay as residents attended a public meeting with officials from CIBC over the financial institution's decision to shutter the bank this August. And from the outset, there were many grievances.
Unfortunate, the rich get richer at the expense of smaller communities. I don't want to hear, oh, that's too bad, we'll do this for you. That's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that Terrace Bay has to lose services.
Very sad. I don't drive to Thunder Bay, and I do not have a computer, so I'm at the mercy of my family.
And I'm very disappointed with CBIC. And if there's any way that I can get out of it, I'm going to do it.
And I'm really angry. I'd like to get up and leave, but I can't get my coat off my chair fast enough.
Jan Kastakainen, Senior Manager of Stakeholder Communications for CIBC, knew coming in it was going to be a tough crowd.
We knew many of the issues that we were going to hear about ahead of time, and so we were obviously fully prepared to be able to bring some perspective from different parts of the bank. And I think at the end of it, people were able to, and our clients were able to hear, a bit of the background that led to our decision here in Terrace Bay.
Mayor Jody Davis says the bank officials listened well, but like many others in the crowd, felt the institution did not do its due diligence when making the decision to close the bank.
One of the things that I think particularly that the banks, especially the CIBC, they're not taking a look at what the impact is when you remove a bank from a small town that has no other banking service. They're taking the cornerstone of that community away.
Adding further insult to the town, TBT News has learned that none of the employees at the bank were offered jobs at other branches. Councillor Bert Johnson knew how the meeting would go despite the strong turnout and evidence showing the support for a bank that was gathered by the town.
I wasn't surprised at all. I think the decision was made months ago, and the only surprise, like I say, is that they are considering a bank machine here.
The final day of operation for the CIBC branch in Terrace Bay will be August 15th. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took some heat this week after an incident at a party fundraiser on Wednesday. But it had nothing to do with the ongoing SNC-Lavalin affair. Instead, the issue at hand was one with deep ties to the Northwest. Once again, here's Adam Riley.
People in grassy narrows are suffering from mercury poisoning.
That's how it all started during a speech by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a Liberal Party fundraiser Wednesday, after protesters unfurled a banner and were escorted out. But it was his subsequent comments that sparked headlines across the country.
Thank you for being here. Thank you very much for your donation tonight. I really appreciate it.
The next day, the Prime Minister was in full damage control mode and issued an apology on the incident.
Last night, I lacked respect towards them, and I apologize for that. It is obviously an issue that they take very seriously.
Grassy Narrows has been one of the many points of contention between the government and Indigenous activists in recent years. During the 1960s and 70s, the English and Wabigoon river systems were contaminated with mercury from the mill in Dryden, and since then has been causing health issues for the community located north of Kenora. Since being elected in 2015, the federal government has been working to fix the problems, including the promise to set up a mercury treatment center in the community, a project that was reiterated by Grand Chief Francis Kavanagh of Grand Council Treaty 3 in a release. The federal government must be reminded of their 2017 promise to fund a specialized mercury treatment facility in the Grassy Narrows First Nation. Nothing has been done, and our people continue to suffer. We want to see action now. Trudeau says he will be allocating attention to the Grassy Narrows file.
The situation in Grassy Narrows is one that we have been following for quite a while. It involves elements of provincial jurisdiction and federal responsibility. I will be speaking later, making sure my office speaks later with Minister O'Regan's office and make sure that we're looking at exactly everything we can do.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
The municipality of Red Lake has passed its 2019 budget, but it took multiple attempts to get it right. At a special meeting on Monday, council voted down the budget by a margin of 3-2. The capital projects portion of the budget contained $12.8 million to be invested in various areas, such as an investment into the future fleet for the Red Lake Fire Department, a Class A engineering event design center, patching for sections of the roadways in town, and the bulk of it, some $9.5 million, dedicated to improvements to the runway at the Red Lake Airport.
Council would like a larger increase in taxes. So we proposed a 0.9% tax increase. Council feels that we should increase that number to at least 1.5% due to OMPF cuts, increase in services, costs, everything associated with everyday run-of-the-mill municipality work.
Mayor Fred Moda says the 0.9% increase was brought forward as the town is receiving just over $1 million in funding for infrastructure projects from both the federal and provincial governments. On Wednesday, a second special meeting of council was convened and a new budget with only one change to the original, a 1.5% tax increase, was passed. Coming up after the break, Red Lake's emergency shelter opens its doors to the public. When we think of the homeless population in Ontario, we tend to focus on larger centres like Toronto or Thunder Bay. But the reality is even smaller communities face their fair share of homelessness and don't receive as much of the needed assistance. However, some things are changing for some communities. This week, Red Lake celebrated the official opening of its new emergency homeless shelter. Adam Riley was there and he files this report.
It was all smiles and reflection of months of hard work, sweat, and tears Monday in Red Lake for the grand opening of the Red Lake Area Emergency Shelter. Executive Director Janalee Jodouin says there have been many ups and downs since the property, a former laundromat, was purchased and rezoned in 2017.
We started the renovations in November of 2017. In April of 2018, all the work that we did downstairs on this section of the building was flooded through our heating system, which is no fault of anybody's, it just happened. So that set us back about 6 months.
Jodouin says the shelter also serves as a base of operations for outreach services and is capable of handling up to 30 people at a time. Kenora MP Bob Nault was on hand for the opening. He says almost 85% of the funding to rebuild the facility was from the federal government through the United Way and Service Canada. He adds that despite a strong economy, every community should have a shelter of some sort.
No matter how successful a nation is, there's always people who have struggles, who have the need for the help of their citizenry to get them in a better space, in a better place. And if you go take a look at the new emergency shelter, you'll be impressed and proud of the work that's gone on here in Red Lake.
In addition to the emergency shelter, the facility also has 2 supportive housing units for those needing a longer stay.
And while those 2 units might not sound like much, they're just the beginning. Earlier this month, the federal government invested $14.4 million in affordable housing, 5.1 of which was dedicated to the Kenora riding. Several of those units will be allocated here in Red Lake, according to Mayor Fred Moda.
New starts for women. They're looking at a 10 housing apartment type complex residential area. We're also working with Aboriginal Housing of Ontario to develop also a 30 townhouse unit complex to go in centralized Red Lake.
Moda says both of those initiatives, in addition to the shelter, are going to advance Red Lake on its housing issues and needs, adding it's not enough, but it's a start. Adam Riley, TBT News.
The provincial government and officials with Kenora Rainy River District's Child and Family Services have confirmed that a lawyer representing the agency is no longer employed by them. The firing stems from an incident where the lawyer representing the KRRDCFS in a legal battle with a woman who said that she was sexually abused by her foster father while in care stated in court that a 14-year-old girl is a sexually mature young woman. That sparked outcry from child advocates and politicians across the province, and spokesperson Bill Leonard says this statement is appalling and intolerable, and I agree with comments reported regarding the abhorrent nature of this statement. For the first time, the Ontario SPCA has joined forces with area municipalities and Indigenous leaders to craft a plan for pets in the remote north. A gathering called the Northwestern Ontario Regional Animal Summit began Friday with a full slate of discussions on tap. Corey Nordstrom has more.
The first ever Regional Animal Summit has one goal: to ensure that pets in the north receive expanded care that they badly need.
We all have a common goal to work together more efficiently to serve more animals and increase community wellness across the north.
Northern Pets are exactly what the two-day summit is about. It's brought Indigenous leaders, regional municipalities, and the Ontario Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals together to craft ideas that could help what they say is an increasing problem. Those involved say it's a long-awaited summit.
To me, this is absolutely amazing. It's more than I had ever hoped for, and I think it's wonderful that we could all come together and work as a big team.
Those who live in northern communities say the lack of services such as spay and neutering has led to a high number of domestic animals in the north which require significant support, and with many communities being far from veterinary care, accessibility is a large stressor.
As a pet owner, I have 3 dogs, and it's very stressful because I'm always worried if, say, my dog gets off a leash and another dog attacks it. You don't have to worry about that out here, you just bring them right to the vet. I have to let my dog sit in pain for a long time and then take them out. So that's really stressful, and I always worry about them all the time.
The OSPCA had recently announced it would soon be scaling back its duties, such as active enforcement by their agents, but they say this summit shows the rest of the work they do.
Our enforcement support services only cover 20% of the work that we do. The work that we are providing through the summit here is an example of the 80% of other work that we've done across the province. So this is exactly what we've been working towards and what we'll continue to work towards to help support.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Fresh off of the release of the 2019 federal budget and a grueling 32-hour voting session in the House of Commons, Kenora MP Bob Nolt was back home in his riding this week. Starting off in Red Lake for several events, Nolt spent time discussing the benefits of the 2019 budget to residents and town officials. He says the budget puts an emphasis on skills development, seniors, municipalities, and 2 other categories that he believes are essential to the Kenora riding.
In a region like ours, so large, infrastructure has to be one of the main themes no matter what we do, so we put a lot more money into infrastructure. We have a huge Aboriginal population, so we put a lot more resources into continuing to build First Nation communities, which will have a huge impact on Red Lake, huge impact on the rest of the larger centre, simply because these are neighbours and they're customers at the same time because everybody's in this together.
Nolt says the doubling of the gas tax will also have a huge benefit for the region. Red Lake, for example, will receive close to $600,000 in 2019, which will be used for various infrastructure projects. American authorities arrested a Sioux Lookout woman after she attempted to transport more than 20 grams of cocaine across the border. On March 16th, U.S. Custom and Border Protection officers at Grand Portage Port of Entry conducted an inspection on a vehicle. During the inspection, officers located 20 small baggies of a white powdery substance that tested positive for cocaine. The total weight seized was 2.9 grams. A 43-year-old Sioux Lookout woman was taken into custody by the Cook County Sheriff's Office for possible prosecution. Coming up next, officers with the Ontario Provincial Police are on thin ice trying to save lives. With the warmer temperatures as of late, the ice on rivers and lakes around northwestern Ontario is starting to become more dangerous, and area police services are getting ready for it. A group of officers were recently learning firsthand how to deal with a fall through the ice. Alana Pickrell has a story.
And then just breathe, buddy. Yeah, just breathe. Yeah, long breaths in, long breaths out.
11 OPP and 2 Anishinaabe police officers made the plunge into the cold water of Lake Superior for a different kind of training. As warmer weather slowly chips away at the ice on the lake, snowmobilers and other residents are at a greater risk for falling through. In preparation for a rescue that officers hope they'll never have to make, Constable Andrew York says he's getting in voluntarily so he knows what to do.
The body goes through a set of kind of responses, so we'll be acclimatizing ourselves to that for the first minute. We'll be trying to catch our breath, and then we'll be trying to crawl out of the water or have someone rescue us by throwing a rope.
One by one, officers fell into the cold lake water and waited for 90 seconds, fully submerged from the neck down. Following the initial shock, the wet and cold trainees kicked their way out of the water before jumping straight back in and using ice picks a second time.
Hard, kick hard. You can do it. You're almost there, Chelsea. A little more, a little more.
York says the cold temperatures aren't the first thing that get people into trouble if they end up falling in.
But most people drown before they actually freeze to death. So if you can actually keep your wits about you and tell yourself, okay, like I've got at least a minute here to get my breathing under control, then I've got about 10 minutes before I'm going to lose kind of function of my hands and kind of find muscle control. That gives you time to get a game plan going and then be able to get yourself out of the water.
As part of the motor snow vehicle course, there are now 13 new officers trained for any unwanted winter swimming in the future. Alana Pickrell, TBT News.
And that's all for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Nima Rajan. Take care.